Facebook and Google team up with media companies to tackle what they assess to be fake news ahead of the French presidential election. Critics cry foul and call the fact-checkers politically biased. U.S. senators introduce a new bill aimed at giving Congress veto power over President Trump in the event he moves to lift Russian sanctions. Well, a German bakery turns the tables on a reported boycott of its store amidst the U.S. president facing incessant media attacks as its Trump cakes proved to be a hit with customers. Also, and in spite of protests and legal objections, the British Prime Minister's Brexit plan finds an overwhelming majority in a House of Commons vote. Live from our International News Centre here in Moscow, you're with RT International just after midday. Welcome to the programme. Facebook and Google have launched an offensive against so-called fake news in the lead-up to the French presidential election in April. The initiative comes after the tech giants were criticised for not doing enough to combat false information during the US presidential campaign. Charlotte Dubinsky takes up the story.
It came into its own during the US election campaign, and now it seems that barely a day goes by without some claim of a story being fake.
Well, here in France, as the country gears up for the presidential election, the fight against fake news is also underway. Now, Google and Facebook have teamed up with a number of news partners to comb through social media sites and to see what passes the litmus test of truth. Now, it's called cross-check. But how will it work? Well, basically, if somebody flags up a story as being potentially untrue, then these news partners will fact-check it.
If the report is deemed fake by at least two of them, then it will be tagged with an icon to show there's something potentially fishy about it. But can these fact-checkers actually be trusted?
This is the most dangerous thing that you could possibly do. You're going to let Facebook or Google or whoever determine what's real? What you're doing is you're allowing a third party, and by the way, censorship does not have to be the government, but you're allowing somebody to act as a filter between you and the truth? It's insane. This isn't censorship. Censorship means changing a few words. This is blocking you from the news, keeping the news from you. This is worse than censorship.
Facebook's fake news detector in Germany has also come under scrutiny because of funding by groups linked to US billionaire George Soros and the establishment media. And what about Google and Facebook? They're trying to guide people through the mass of contradictory information in the run-up to the election, although they themselves have been accused of playing politics. Charlotte Dubinsky, RT, Paris.
BuzzFeed is one of the organisations partnering with CrossCheck, despite the fact it has never been accused of producing fake news. The online media company came under fire last month for publishing a story with, quote, explosive but unverified compromising information about President Trump. Another partner, Bellingcat, is best known for analysing public data relating to the downing of flight MH17 in eastern Ukraine. But the founder of the research service used by Bellingcat described their findings as an example of how not to do forensic analysis. Meanwhile, Facebook has already launched a similar initiative in the US. We asked New Yorkers if they think it'll help stop the spread of so-called fake news.
You heard about the fake news controversy?
Of course. Everybody accuses everybody else of fake news, but I tend to associate most of it with the mainstream media. Instead of giving you what you would call delivering news like reporting, they kind of embellish it so that it meets their political objectives instead of doing what a reporter is supposed to do.
It's not anything I've heard, I've just observed. Everything that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth is a lie.
Donald Trump is responsible, and so is Flynn. for much of the fake news.
I think it's ridiculous. A lot of the stuff out there is, not the truth, and they're putting things out and they're getting misconstrued.
I mean, if people had better critical thinking skills, you'd think they'd be able to see through it. So I think there's a lot of deeper problems going on than just that people are posting whatever they want.
Facebook has just come out with this new thing where they want to actually label news agencies that they don't like as being quote-unquote fake news. Have you heard about this?
No, I haven't, but it sounds like a good idea. It sounds like things should be fact-checked.
One side sees something as news and the other side is exposed to it and goes, this isn't anything close to what we believe, and vice versa. So I think you have on both sides an issue. I don't know how you can really regulate it.
I think that's got to be up to you. I mean, listen, if somebody comes up to you and says, hey, do you want to buy Starbucks? I'll give it to you for $500. Would you buy it? You probably wouldn't.
I don't trust any of it at all. No one can tell you what you should believe and what you shouldn't.
Facebook can do whatever they want, and if you don't like what Facebook's telling you about their information, then just don't go on Facebook.
The Trump administration is reportedly drawing up an executive order which could see Islamic State terrorists being housed in Guantanamo Bay prison. A draft document obtained by the New York Times states America remains committed to its battle against terror groups. It also says Guantanamo should be used for newly captured detainees, including ISIL fighters. But several national security officials and legal scholars say the measure could undermine America's efforts to defeat the extremist threat. We discussed that with commentators for and against the move.
Well, I object to the characterization of Guantanamo as a notorious place of torture. I think the prisoners there have been treated very, very fairly, and that's just hysteria from the left calling it a torture chamber.
What your other guest just said is absolute nonsense. Torture took place at Guantanamo pervasively. The FBI observed it. And there's dozens upon dozens of testimonials from people who are victims of torture at Guantanamo.
I just have to say, your guest is the epitome of what's wrong on the left. You know, these people are the most brutal, vicious. I don't even call them humans. They are not entitled to constitutional protections of U.S. residents and citizens.
The answer to the barbarism of the Islamic State is barbarism from the United States, then what is the point of the battle? It's supposed to be a battle of right against a battle of wrong. Two wrongs don't make a right, and if the United States engages in torture again, as it has done in the past at Guantanamo, whatever toxic lies your guest says, then we've really lost the purpose of the entire war on terror.
Jeremy, I'm sick and tired of the moral equivalence of the left equating people that tear out hearts and eat them in front of people while they're alive, eating victims in front of their own parents, grinding up their remains of people they've slaughtered, and having their parents eat them. If you think that is there's any moral equivalence between that, no, you drew a moral equivalence that said two wrongs don't make a right.
Look, I'm not saying
we are nowhere
there's
near the barbarity in the America. Your yelling is not going to make your point for you, sir. You made a moral equivalence argument. You are dead wrong.
Choose my words carefully. There's a sliding scale of atrocities. Okay, Guantanamo is not, Auschwitz. Understood. Beheading an innocent person is worse than torturing somebody during an interrogation. But the fact is that both represent serious crimes that violate international law and nothing to be proud about.
The primary job of the United States president is to keep America safe, and that's exactly what he's doing. And the left is doing everything they can, the hard left, the anarchist left, to stop him from keeping America safe.
I want to be safe. I don't want my child to, die because he's blown up in a subway in New York either. And among other things, refilling Guantanamo makes me afraid that it is only going to confirm the worst suspicions of people who already dislike America and mean more violence and bloodshed on all sides.
Well, the U.S. president's policies have divided the American public. Whether it's his immigration restrictions or even Twitter habits, the EU has called Trump's America even a potential threat to Europe. However, one bakery in Germany is making Donald Trump all the more easier to digest.
It says, "Back at I Trump," in black letters. Could this be Trump's far-right fan club in the German countryside? Trump's last name everywhere. and his face all over the place. Actually, that's just a bakery owned by Ursula Trump, whose husband shares great-great-great-great-grandparents with the U.S. president.
Mein Mann macht Ahnenforschung und 1727 in 7. Generation, also ist mein Mann seine Vorfahren verwandt mit ihm.
To mark Donald Trump's settling into the Oval Office, she came up with...
Das sind die sogenannten Trumpfschnitten.
Or the Trump cakes. It all seems like harmless fun, but local journalists didn't see it that way and came up with this story. Then their colleagues in Britain found another angle, claiming there's a boycott looming over Frau Trump's business. Oh, that anti-Trump hype we've seen before all over the place, and it's been just as intense in the German media. Well, we came to the bakery to get the truth. First of all, it turned out that Frau Trump isn't exactly Donald Trump's biggest fan.
Der Trump halt im Vorfeld sehr negativ sich geäußert hat über Frauen, frauenfeindlich und noch mehr.
And despite the supposed boycott, she says the cake has been a bit of a jackpot.
Am ersten Tag waren es 120 Schnitten. Ich habe nicht gedacht, dass das so, die Reklame so weitergeht und dass so viele kommen. Das habe ich nicht geglaubt. Super.
I have one photos. In Facebook habe ich.
Okay.
Selfie.
The cakes were meant to be limited edition, but Frau Trump doesn't mind continuing to sell. Let's ask the people of the town about the boycott. Do you think someone can boycott the bakery because of the cake? Do you think?
I think not.
No.
Yes, Trump is not so popular.
I'm not too worried about it. I think it's just cake.
Glaub nicht, weil die Leute gehen ja sehr gerne zu der Frau Trump einkaufen.
Wird vielleicht sogar eher ein Verkaufsschlager. Love him or loathe him, you just can't boycott the cake when it's so sweet.
Well, staying with things, Donald Trump, if he tries to ease sanctions against Russia, he could hit a cross-party firewall in Congress. That's as Democrats and Republican senators are trying to introduce an act to counter the president. With the details from Washington, here's Guyaneh Chichikan.
The bill titled the Russia Sanctions Review Act is seeking to tie President Trump's hands when it comes to forging relations with Russia. The 6 lawmakers who introduced the legislation want to make sure President Trump does not, without congressional approval, lift the sanctions imposed on Russia by the Obama administration. The bill, if it passes, would require the Trump administration to explain to lawmakers what the Russian government has done to warrant a sanctions relief. And then Congress would give itself 4 months to approve or disapprove of the president's, at this point, hypothetical initiative to lift the sanctions. The co-sponsors of this newly introduced legislation, including Lindsey Graham and John McCain, are known as hawks on Russia, who vehemently oppose any positive contact between U.S. and Russian administrations. Donald Trump repeatedly said he wanted good relations with Russia. However, when recently asked about lifting the sanctions against Russia, Trump said it was too early to talk about it. Here.
As far as the sanctions, very early to be talking about that. But we look to have a great relationship with all countries, ideally. But if we can have a great relationship with Russia and with China and with all countries, I'm all for that. That would be a tremendous asset.
On sanctions, Trump also said this, quote, if you get along and if Russia is really helping us, why would anybody have sanctions if somebody is doing some really great things, end quote. Meanwhile, key members of his cabinet have said things that sounded, shall we say, less optimistic.
I would consider the principal threats to start with Russia.
Russia today poses a danger.
Russia has reasserted itself aggressively.
It's unclear at this point what course President Trump will actually take with Russia. Generally, foreign policy, forging relations with different countries is the president's prerogative. And the lawmakers may be trying to, if not block, then significantly restrict President Trump's ability to carry out his own policy vis-a-vis Russia.
Congress is not an agile, unified body for making foreign policy decisions. It's a big obstacle, but it's not insurmountable, right? Because Donald Trump can go ahead and begin talking to Vladimir Putin And they can start working on some of these problems that have to do with terrorism, that have to do with Syria, that have to do with eastern Ukraine. And if they can make some progress between the two of them, they and their teams, then they present, a new treaty or a new agreement or a new understanding that substantially improves the situation. Then it becomes much harder for Congress to stand in the way.
Romano Prodi says Europe is suffering from the sanctions struck down by Brussels and the United States on Russia. RT spoke exclusively to the former Italian Prime Minister on that and a number of other issues.
Never sanctions have effect, in my opinion, very seldom. The real victims of the sanction were the Europeans, so it was a strange case of sanction, Now, I always thought that it was not European interest to have sanctions. Now, even the Americans say so, so how could I disagree? The number was overwhelming, and the voters, the Germans' reaction was against it, and she changed the opinion, as it often happens in the contemporary democracy, the voters are the kings. First goal is to end the wars and to end the tensions. We have always had immigration, but when Gaddafi was leading Libya, many times he was, let's say, menacing me to send boats of people. He never did, because there were two states, but immigration will go on for a long time. We have to work to regulate it.
More news in 90 seconds. Stay with us.
Easy right or wrong, but I definitely think sanctions are better than conflict.
You don't perform for diplomatic reasons. You perform for humanitarian ways.
I'm talking obviously about Edward Snowden.
I believe he's a hero. I believe he's coming directly from his heart.
You know what you will never, ever, ever see on American mainstream media?
You won't hear it anywhere else. This story was almost completely left out of the Western mainstream press.
You won't see it anywhere else.
This is not talked about on CNN because it's not allowed.
You won't see it anywhere else.
Things you'll hear on Crosstalk.
Hello again. The UK edged ever closer to Brexit on Wednesday evening after a large majority of the House of Commons voted for draft legislation to allow the government to begin the UK's departure from the EU. The Prime Minister had initially tried to bypass Parliament in her efforts to meet her promise.
Brexit means Brexit.
Brexit means Brexit. Brexit means Brexit.
Brexit means Brexit, and we're going to make a success of it.
Well, the bill will now be debated in the House of Lords, and the terms must be approved by both houses before Theresa May gets the green light to begin formal Brexit talks. Last night's overwhelming majority came despite the fact that many members of the House had previously campaigned against exiting.
Which was a bit of a surprise, given that at least two-thirds of the British MPs actually were in favour of us staying in the EU. But overwhelmingly they've shifted to say we accept the view of the public, the majority view of the public is to leave the EU. We as the Parliament have to represent that view of the public.
Well, prior to Wednesday's vote on the bill, experts had suggested that opposition might equate to, quote, electoral suicide for some MPs, especially those with large numbers of Leave voters in their constituencies. Meanwhile, some Scottish MPs weren't afraid to voice or even sing their objections.
Order!
Well, that particular chorus came around after the bill survived unchanged, despite a large number of amendments being put to vote. MPs ruled out the possibility of a second referendum, as well as the chance to stay in the EU if Parliament fails to back Brexit. And the approval of Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland will not be needed to trigger Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty, the formal mechanism for any country wishing to leave the EU. There's no doubt that many aren't happy with the outcome, though, a matter we discussed with MPs.
Very straightforwardly, the bottom line for me is that we asked the British people to make a decision last year. They voted that they wanted to leave the European Union. I think it's incumbent upon me and other members of Parliament to respect the vote of the people. I don't think anybody can be criticised for making what they think is the right decision, even though other people would disagree with them. But it's not going to finish now. This is the beginning of a process. There's going to be negotiations, there's going to be reporting back to the Commons, there's going to be further scrutiny, there's going to be further opportunities for debates. This is not the end, this is just the beginning.
There's a very significant number of the Labour Party people are gathering up their confidence and facing up to the reality that this Brexit will do Britain serious damage. I'm primarily concerned about Scotland and Northern Ireland, and the insensitivity of the Conservatives on this issue to the needs of Scotland and the needs of Northern Ireland is horrifying me. The result of forcing a Brexit against the wishes of Northern Ireland and against the wishes of Scotland will cause constitutional chaos, because I don't think the United Kingdom can survive. I mean, during the campaign, the referendum campaign, they promised us, the Brexiteers promised us, 350 million a week extra for the NHS. Whereas today it has evaporated. It was a lie, and there were a number of other lies and misleading information around that whole campaign.
UK authorities have allegedly spent £5 million on training Bahraini justice and security officials, a human rights organisation has reported. Reprieve's investigation comes amid concerns over brutal tactics being used by Bahrain police against demonstrators since 2011. Human rights groups have repeatedly called on the international community to take action against police brutality in the kingdom. In November, Amnesty filed a report which noted that the country's Prime Minister reportedly told police officials that the law does not apply to them. The organisation also reported about numerous cases of officers not being held accountable for their actions against protesters or inmates. We spoke to a former member of Bahrain's parliament. He believes the UK is inflaming the issue of brutality by authorities in the country.
This is not the first time the UK authorities try to cover up their relations with the intelligence and the police in Bahrain. Just a few months ago, when the UK Prime Minister went to Bahrain, there were lots of pressure that she will be dealing with the deterioration of the human rights situation in Bahrain, and she did say that she will not give her back to that issue, but once she was in Bahrain, she only supported whatever the brutal regime of Bahrain is doing. That's why, because of lots of criticism against the UK government, I believe they tend to hide these acts.
Well, the UK previously denied providing public order training to Bahrain, saying they have not funded any programs of the kind in the Gulf monarchy. Now, we contacted the UK Foreign Office on the issue. They replied that working with Bahrain is the only way to bring about change in the country, and that the assistance is in line with the UK's domestic and international human rights obligations. Bahraini political activist Saeed al-Shahabi says Britain has been helping Bahrain's authorities to control unrest for some time.
The UK does not want to leave that region. They have adopted a brutal policy, starting with sending John Yates, the Deputy Commissioner of Police, in 2002, and part of the prison inspection team. The UK inspection team has been there training the Bahraini police, but unfortunately this training has led to worse human rights violations. So I do not think the UK has done its homework properly in Bahrain.
Just ahead, biographer of US presidents and former media mogul Conrad Black is the guest on Worlds Apart. Stay tuned for his predictions on Donald Trump's presidency.